Shalom, Esther Gidu Yuwat. It's Wednesday, August 23rd. This is Africa 54.
International diplomats are speaking out against Niger's junta, condemning the coup as they call for the immediate release of detained President Mohamed Bazoum. And despite voting delays, Zimbabweans cast their ballots in tense and tight presidential elections. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
The U.S. State Department is confirming that the new U.S. ambassador to Niger has spoken with detained President Mohamed Bazoum. Since arriving in Niamey, Ambassador Kathleen Fitzgibbon has reiterated the U.S. government's call for a diplomatic solution that preserves constitutional order in Niger and for the immediate release of President Bazoum, his family, and all those unlawfully detained, according to a State Department spokesperson. Meanwhile, the foreign ministers from Germany and Senegal also spoke about the ongoing tense situation in Niger.
We condemn. I condemn the coup d'etat in the strongest possible terms and will welcome the decisive and firm response by ECOWAS to the crisis in Niger. Germany and the European Union stand behind ECOWAS's two-track approach of diplomacy and pressure. In order to lay emphasis on ECOWAS's efforts, Germany has suspended all payments to the state of Niger, and we now want to push for individual sanctions among EU member states against the coup plotters. We said from day one that Germany supports ECOWAS' efforts for democracy in the region. I repeatedly spoke by phone with the foreign minister of Niger's elected government. The Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, spoke 3 times with the president of Niger and were in constant exchange with ECOWAS and the African Union. I would like to make clear here that what the regional organization ECOWAS is doing on site right now is not just important for the people in Niger, but it's important for peace in the world.
What happens in Niger concerns all of us, all democracies in the world, and all those who believe in democracy, dialogue, and elections, respect, and constitutional rules. That is why together we condemn the coup d'etat, all coups d'etats.
Niger military officers deposed President Mohamed Bazoum on July 26th and have so far defied calls from the United Nations, ECOWAS, and Western powers to reinstate him, prompting West African heads of state to ready standby troops to be assembled in case force is needed. Voting is ongoing in Zimbabwe Wednesday amid reports of massive delays that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission blamed on what it calls logistical problems. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare, where both main presidential candidates are hopeful of victory.
Zimbabweans started queuing as early as 5 a.m. to take part in the general election, in which 8-year-old incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa is competing against 10 candidates. He cast his vote in his hometown of Kwekwe, about 3 hours drive from Harare.
If I think I'm not going to take it, then I'll be foolish. Everyone who contests, if you're going to rest to win. And precisely is what I'm doing.
Mnangagwa's main contender is Nelson Chamisa of the Citizens Movement for Change, who cast his vote in Harare. He complained about delays to open the polls, but was optimistic of victory.
There's going to be peace in Zimbabwe, prosperity in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe will never be the same again. Citizens have won, citizens are winning. We are going to have a new government in this country.
40-year-old voter Lorraine Madziwa sums up the issues at stake in this Zimbabwean election.
In this country, we want industries to start working and people should have decent houses. We want houses in this area of Mbare renovated, as well as playing grounds and schools. At the playgrounds, our children can't use them because of their conditions. Sewage is all over. That's what I want addressed if the votes go as per my plan.
But not everyone has change in mind, as in the case of 52-year-old voter April Kunonga. He wants what has been happening in Zimbabwe since the late Robert Mugabe was removed from power in 2017 to continue under Mnangagwa.
When it removed Mugabe's government, it started repairing roads, installing boreholes and irrigation pipes, as well as so many projects.
Presidential results are expected by Monday, while results from the parliamentary election are expected to start trickling in Thursday morning. Columbus Mafunga for VOA News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Staying on Zimbabwe, reporter Fungai Masoni is in Harare and has more on Wednesday's election.
We are here in Harare, at the center and the pulse of Zimbabwe's economy. Business owners, traders, and young entrepreneurs are keeping a close eye on the election, with the hope that the outcomes of this election will have a positive impact on the economic landscape. Let's hear what they have to say.
As a business owner, I'm looking forward for sustainable policies that can help us to grow our business here in Zimbabwe. We are expecting huge transformation, and we hope that our government will understand the need of the private sector and to create a good enabling environment so that we can conduct our business peacefully and be able to make profits. Today's vote will determine if our aspirations will be met.
What I expect from the outcome of this election is transformation of the economy, a reduction in inflation, and the general improvement in standards of living.
We hope as youth we get to have our own businesses, gaining more experience. We don't want to be afraid when we have our businesses. I have my own business and I don't want to be afraid of being chased away.
As an entrepreneur, I'm seeking opportunities for growth and innovation. I hope to see a government that provides access to capital and invests in technology and skills development. Our decision at the polls will shape our future, and the outcome of the result will determine whether our dreams can take flight.
That was reporter Fungai Masoni reporting from Harare in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe holds general elections on Wednesday with just one woman as a presidential candidate out of 11 contenders. While the number of women running for parliamentary and council seats has improved, gender activists say more work is needed when just one woman is running for the nation's highest office. Columbus Mavunga files this report from Harare.
On Zimbabwe's presidential ballot, there are 11 candidates. Only one is a woman, 49-year-old Elizabeth Valerio. The former nature conservationist says campaigning has been a challenge because many people in Zimbabwe, including women, still believe that a man should lead this country.
And so I think as I've been able to get more and more exposure and the platform has grown for me to be able to share our views, our vision, our mission, the manifesto that we have created, people are starting to embrace me as a woman, as a leader. But initially, I think culturally, we've got a lot of work to do in terms of changing the mindset of Zimbabweans and getting them to understand that women are just as capable.
The Zimbabwe Gender Commission released a statement saying it was disappointed that only one female candidate made the presidential election ballot in a country of 15 million people where the majority of voters are women. Magdalene Chiku is chairwoman of the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe.
I think we are going to lobby for more women to participate going forward. We are also going to see how these women can be assisted to fundraise because, as you are aware, the electoral fee was high and a lot of people struggled to reach the benchmark.
Linda Masarira sought to run in the election but was rejected after failing to pay the $20,000 registration fee on time. That fee is up from the $1,000 in 2018 when 4 female candidates made the ballot in the presidential race. Subsistently, Buddha Masara from the Zimbabwe Women's Parliamentary Caucus says more women also need to contest for seats in the legislature.
Right now, in parliamentary elections, only 7% of contestants are female for the 210 seats. So there's much which will come out. So we should start in council getting 50-50 men and women.
For now, activists are watching to see how Valerio fares in the presidential election. Columbus Mavungam, VOA News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
For more on Zimbabwe's general elections, I'm joined live via Zoom from Kwekwe by Blessed Malanga, a reporter with our affiliate partner in Zimbabwe, Heart and Soul Broadcasting Service. Blessed, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, give us the latest on today's voting. What's happening there?
Well, this is an election that many Zimbabweans would want to forget. Many Zimbabweans were at the polling station early in the morning to vote. And
I'm losing your audio and barely sees you. Can you hear me, Blessed? Blessed, can you hear me? All right, we move on to another election happening in West Africa. Gabon's presidential election is on Saturday, and President Ali Bongo is campaigning for re-election in remote corners of the country this month, seeking to dispel opposition claims that he lacks the strength and track record to fulfill his generous electoral promises in a third term. His main challenger is Albert Ondo Osa, the 69-year-old economics and management professor who was picked by an alliance of 6 main opposition parties as their joint candidate barely a week before the vote. Since the start of the armed conflict in Sudan between the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces on April 15th, the RSF and predominantly Arab-allied militias have carried out repeated attacks on towns and villages in West Darfur state. These attacks have mainly targeted areas inhabited by one of the main non-Arab communities. And still to come, a Zambian man turns his passion into a remarkable venture. We'll be right back.
This week on Straight Talk Africa, we'll discuss the 15th BRICS Summit taking place in South Africa this week. Heads of state from Russia, Brazil, India, China and South Africa are convening to discuss expanding the group. Over 40 countries are vying to become members and have a say in the global political and economic arena. For an in-depth discussion, join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Since 2010, the Young African Leaders Initiative, or YALI, has brought 500 young people from across Africa to the United States. The fellows selected for the highly competitive Washington Fellowship Program have a proven record of accomplishment in promoting innovation and positive change in their organizations, institutions, or communities. On the next edition of Our Voices, we will introduce you to some extraordinary young African women to share their experiences in the Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders program. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Now, in other news, the United Nations Special Envoy for Libya says the country's stability is at greater risk following recent militia clashes and amid the danger of spillover from the turmoil in neighboring Sudan and Niger. Abdoulaye Bathily told the UN Security Council on Tuesday that political divisions in Libya are, quote, fraught with risks of violence. Wagner mercenary group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has posted his first video address since leading a short-lived mutiny in Russia late June, appearing in a social media clip which he suggests it was shot in Africa. The date or location of the video has not been verified. Prigozhin speaks of making Russia greater on all continents and Africa more free. And on Saturday, U.S. civil rights leader marked 60 years since the original March on Washington. At the time, Martin Luther King Jr. issued his resounding call for racial harmony that set off decades of ups and downs towards progress. The historic March for Jobs and Freed for remains of a marker by which progress is being measured. We're going to circle back to human rights violations in Sudan. And for more on those militia attacks in West Darfur, I'm joined live from Berlin, Germany by Mohammed Asman, a Sudan researcher for Human Rights Watch, Horn and East Africa. Mohammed, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Give us a brief overview of your research findings on Sudanese civilians fleeing the war in the country.
So overall, our research from the start of the conflict have highlighted the catastrophic civilian cost of this conflict since April 15 this year. But more particularly, we have talked to over 100 of survivors of the violence, in particular from West Darfur capital El Geneina, that has been witnessing horrific amount of abuses against civilians. We definitely encountered accounts of survivors that remind us of the early stages of the Darfur conflict in 2003, when the former government under al-Bashir devised an ethnic cleansing campaign against the non-Arab communities in Darfur. The overall situation is dire. We documented a lot of extrajudicial killings, sexual violence, as we released recently, targeting of the non-Arab population, also killings of the people and communities who were fleeing the conflict towards Chad.
Does your research reveal which ethnic communities are targeted here? I hear from my colleagues who come from Sudan that women are really on the receiving end. What more can you tell us about that?
So when it comes to West Darfur, what we saw is a targeting particularly of men in these communities, which is the Masalit ethnic community within the non-Arab communities. The Masalit is the predominant community in West Darfur. They have been at the crosshairs similar attacks in the last years as well by the Rapid Support Forces and the Arab Allied militias. So men were targeted because they were either fighting, defending their communities, or with the perception of them being fighters. But definitely women and girls also received the brunt of that attack, in particular when it comes to the sexual violence cases we documented.
And what action does Human Rights Watch recommend to hold those responsible to account and support the victims of these violations?
The sad reality of what we're seeing in Darfur now is a direct outcome of the negligence of the international and regional community over the plight of Darfuris. So for once, we welcome the announcement from the International Criminal Courts opening the investigation into the recent events, but more should be done, including to see a movement at the level of the UN Security Council, imposing targeted sanctions on the leaders of these abuses, seeing the Human Rights Council, the UN in Geneva, allowing a mechanism that would investigate, document the abuses that committed in Darfur, and overall further allocation of resources for humanitarians, especially working in Eastern Chad, to provide services, including on sexual and reproductive health for the survivors of sexual violence.
You know, Mohammed, I read parts of your article that, Human Rights Watch, Eastern Horn of Africa has posted out there. It is very harrowing to read some of the things I've heard about young girls being raped, gang raped. And I'm just wondering, who are these victims turning to for medical and psychological help?
So many of these survivors who are now in Eastern Chad have some sort of limited access to healthcare from humanitarians, organizations and local authorities, health authorities in Eastern Chad in particular. But I think it was very clear at that time that much more is needed. And this is why, just to reiterate the call around the need to allocate further resources, easier access to healthcare, sexual reproductive health and psychological support as well.
We know that this war has pitted two groups, the army, the Sudanese army, and also the Rapid Support Forces. Who exactly is responsible for these atrocities?
So when it comes to our findings for the violence in West Darfur, it was primarily the Rapid Support Forces and the tribal Arab militias allied with them, deliberately targeting the Arab communities. Sudan Armed Forces, while present in some parts of West Darfur, including in Guinea, it was significant that they did nothing to protect civilians under attack. And that's a pattern we had saw even before the conflict started.
What does the international law say about such a criminal act? And I also wanted to know, I know that your people were doing research right there, talking to these women. Where are the men? Where are the fathers? Where are the husbands?
That was a very notable observation we had when we arrived first in Eastern Chad in May. It was very noticeable that there were not a lot of men or male, including young adults. And the answer was very clear from the women we met, that men were fearing for their lives because they were the main target, whether they because they are cornered into their neighborhoods or they're worried that they will risk being killed or injured or tortured even on the road to Chad. And I think, there is a lot of issues when it comes to the international law. It's clear violations to international human rights law, international humanitarian law, and international criminal law. This is a situation as described as an internal armed conflict, and this is why it's falling under the jurisdiction of The Hague. But definitely based on the findings and evidence that we may be talking about also war crimes as well.
We hope those women can get help, psychological help, medical care, and that these criminals can be held accountable for what they have done to the people of Sudan. Mohammed, thanks very much for your insight into this.
Thank you.
Mohammed Osman is a Sudan researcher for Human Rights Watch, Horn and East Africa. Now we go to the technology. In today's tech segment, we meet Onija Zani, an extraordinary individual from Lusaka, Zambia, who has turned his passion into airplanes, a remarkable venture here. Tech reporter Paul Ndiho is right here with more. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther, thank you. Onija Zani, a self-taught drone maker and pilot, is fulfilling his childhood dream of becoming a certified drone pilot. His passion for aeronautics led him to launch a drone services and manufacturing startup in Lusaka.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here too.
The last time I talked to you, you had just finished school. You are on a mission to become the next big drone pilot, but not just a drone pilot, a drone maker. What have you been up to?
Ever since we had our last interview, and I would only say that there's been some progress, both in my life and my career, and also with my innovation. I've made mostly improvement on my designing, and also some of the latest designs which are aimed to make to a commercialized model.
You are now a certified drone pilot?
Yes, I am now a certified drone pilot by the Civil Aviation Authority. And also that has enabled me to work with a company within Zambia called Terevia, which offers drone services to the general public. I use pollutants to recycle pollutants that are picked from the environment and therefore make them into aircraft models. And those aircraft models, over the years, have changed or improved to prototypes that will be able to work in the educational sector or the health sector in terms of cargo delivery and also medicine delivery. That's the main objective. Aside from that, also empowerment, knowing that PRIPA aims at employing people within Zambia.
How did you get started? How did you get into this drone business?
Through a desire which says, I want to become a pilot. I want to become an engineer when I grow up. I was exposed to an environment where there were planes. Basically, the Zambia Air Force, Lusaka base. My father was working there in the air power plant. I was born there. Upon being born there, I had this view of planes passing over the roof, having an opportunity to go to the hangar and have to see planes land every day was something that I wanted to. With lots of failures, I believe I've at least learned better designing and operations.
Before you got certified as a drone pilot, you're already flying these drones. What has changed in your life?
The current big step is
Onija Zani is the founder and CEO of Project Prehipa in Lusaka, Zambia. That's today's Tech Reporter. Back to you, Esther.
Paul, thanks, and very sorry for that technical hitch there. Be sure to join Paul Ndiho every Wednesday for his tech segment right here on Africa 54. And we're going to wrap it up there with Africa 54 today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you very much for joining us.